being looked at by somebody else, but it's an important part of the department. Obviously, it's going to contain the Police and Fire Academy and have preliminary classroom training along with specialized in-service training, including an emergency vehicle operations course and some sort of fire training facility. Decentralized training will continue at other facilities, the Central Administration Facility and Sonoran Valley, focusing on in-service skills, maintenance, classroom use, and fire ground drills, things like that. But we actually put some names so far kind of to these operational models: Palm Valley and Downtown, Australia, and Sonoran Valley. There are issues with each of them. For Command Area 1, there's a significant existing population. There's the identified city center that's going to occur there. Parcels are pretty much sold or limited in scope and size, so that's going to have an effect on future facilities. And there's a great distance to the south part of the city. The facilities model that we anticipate would include the central headquarters administration facility, the central support facility, some police and fire substations, and then special facilities like the crisis services. I know they've got a new contract, in a new facility. Vice and narcotics might be located in a separate facility along with the training center. The central Command Area 2, there's a significant growth potential now and even beyond the planning window. But also a lot of those parcels have already been subdivided, land's been spoken for, so there may be a limitation on site size. I think we'd consider towards the south part of that some new substations and substations. Command Area 3, the pending growth is, immediate. It's upon us. It's about to happen. There's significant growth also beyond the planning window that we need to consider. And there's a big geographical separation from the centralized functions and locations. We'd put fire stations, police command station, and perhaps drop-in centers as needed there. In the Command Area 4, there's potential for annexation there with significant population growth and may demand command stations, substations, and fire stations.
When it comes to explaining where fire stations are likely to go, I want to repeat a couple of statements from earlier. Time and distance is a factor. Where a fire station is going to be is based on those two criteria. When it's going to be there is when people and place begin to occur. In order to evaluate the potential of this, we took the existing area and dropped what we refer to as a response polygon on the area to see if we could geographically cover all of the potential areas of land use. You will notice on the maps, and you'll see this later, is that some areas we did not put into the structural fire response because they are Bureau of Land Management areas and unlikely to be developed. What we did is we developed these rhomboids based upon nationally accepted standards, which include the National Fire Protection Association 4-minute 90% of the time, and the Insurance Services Office 1.5 mile for engine company, the 2.5 mile for truck company coverage, and then we developed rhomboids by starting at the south end of the city and the north end of the city and progressively placing those in position until we covered 90% of the ground area. Theoretically, these stations will come online depending on when they trigger and manifest themselves in the way of thresholds.
And this is where we picked up before. Sorry to get confused with my fingers here, but it's different than my, different than my computer, obviously. Oops, I want to go back one. And then I'll finish up. Whoops. Which button did he put?
No, 47.
Huh?
You're 47 right now. You have
there we go. Okay, last slide. Next steps. We were talking with staff when we proposed our scope for work. We knew that there was a public process, maybe a presentation to the Public Safety Advisory Committee. We're working with staff, and tentatively sometime in January we will take our work at that point to them for their review. In early February, we plan to come back to a work session in front of you to discuss in much greater detail the operational and staffing plan that's been developed to that point in time. Then a third work session in March where we will present the facilities strategic plan, that being what facilities we would recommend, the implementation sequence that we would recommend, and some preliminary costing data as we see it at that point in time. Following that work session, we will go back and start working on our draft document, our draft recommendations, master plan proposal for Goodyear and the Sonoran Valley Police and Fire Department. We'll present that to you in May, take your comments, take staff comments and review, and then anticipate coming back in June for a final council presentation and acceptance at that point in time. That concludes my presentation, and we'll be ready to take any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions from the public? Comments from the public? From the council?
Just a comment, Jim.
Yes.
I appreciate the drop-in patrol strategy that you guys are using, because I think we're using that at some of our other fire facilities, and it's worked out very well. It's also really nice to see the synergy between a fire and police, and I don't think all the cities have that. So,
It's true.
Yeah, and so it's really...
And we work with some cities where they do work together, and it's really a nice thing. I agree with you, yes.
Yeah, and we have that, and so
Yeah.
I think the drop-in strategy actually enhances
Plus the fact that the new training center might have the co-located fire and training academies from day one, you know, they start to develop a synergy.
Yeah, and there were 4 of us that went down this past Saturday to the Sonoran Valley and helped open up the fire station, and that was really interesting to see all the mix of people that were
Take the
there.
dirt road down?
Of course. It's like NASCAR.
Further comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back.
Larry, you're up. Update on the revenue estimates.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I will try to keep my comments brief tonight. What we're going to talk about is where we are on the revenues in the 2008 budget. You'll recall 6 months ago, Joe Pizzillo, our budget manager, came up and outlined for the City Council how our revenue estimates were created at that time based on the information available. And so now it's time to give you an update on that. I think if you've been reading the newspapers, you've seen that the state of Arizona is working at a review of its budget and deficit that they're seeing in the budget as of right now. Some of that deficit is from the preceding year, and some of that carries into the current year. Article in the paper the other day that Maricopa County is going through the same exercise, and actually most of the governments, municipal and state around the state of Arizona, are going through a review at this point in time. So what we'd like to do this evening in this budget discussion is to review our trends with you, what's happening, and then follow that up with a discussion of the impacts on the trends in the revenue on the current budget, on the 2009 budget, and on the capital improvement plan. We're going to discuss the tightening of the sales tax as part of our revenue streams, and then short-term and long-term strategies. As we go through this, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask me at the time. I will try to get through. There are a couple of key points at the end that I will want to emphasize. And I'm going to point out that maybe this presentation is going to follow kind of a reverse trend where I'm going to be taking us down a little bit, maybe a little bit depressing, and then come back at the end maybe a little bit more on an optimistic note, so we don't leave completely with a sad story at the end of the tale. We're going to focus tonight completely on general fund revenues. Our enterprise funds, which are the water, sewer, and utility, those revenues are holding steady with the projections, and at this point in time, we're not going to spend a lot of time discussing those. And within the general fund, this discussion is primarily based on the sales tax revenues. The reason for that is if you look at this particular chart, over 56% of our general fund revenues for the year that just ended, June 30th of 2007, come from tax revenues. 50% of those 50% of that total, if I were to draw the line just straight up and down here and leave just that little wedge, which would be about 6%, 50% comes from sales tax. Clearly a key part of our revenue stream, and so it's important that we have an idea of what's been happening. Total sales tax. These are all of the sales tax categories, including construction sales tax, retail taxes on everything else. Thought we'd give you a trend dating back to 2000 of how our sales tax has grown. In 2000, we were approximately $10 million in sales tax collections. For that year, you can see the growth picked up. By this scale, it looks at a fairly slow rate, but that number was a lot lower, and so it would appear at a slower rate. But if you look starting in 2005, the sales tax growth increased significantly. We projected a slowdown in that growth of sales tax, as you can see, as we went into this budget process. On a monthly basis, the graph is a little bit harder to see clarity in, as it's constantly going up and down throughout the process. But you can see the trend that's showing an increase up to about the tip of the pen there, followed by this trend that starts going down, and that break line is approximately March of 2007, where the data starts changing. At this point, I want, yes?
Larry, you know, $1 million drop in 1 month is rather significant, is it not?
It is. As we go through the details, hopefully I'll be able to ask that for you, but answer that. In this particular case, that drop, if you're referring to the drop in
07.
January of 07,
The tail end of it. No.
oh, at the very end right here?
Yeah, right.
That's correct. That is a very significant drop. We had a spike up and a spike down. And what you'll see as I get to some of the individual charts in here, we had a payment in August from an anomaly transaction that happened in a construction sales tax. We're still researching whether or not that even is appropriate Goodyear revenue, but regardless of that, it is definitely the type of transaction that only happens once. That transaction by itself, if I'm not mistaken, was about $750,000. So that is a lot of that spike that you're referring to, where it jumped up 1 month and then jumped back down the subsequent month.
All right, thank you.
Larry, when you're looking at this,
Yes.
January is January, it's not December's collection?
That's very good. I think to answer that, first of all, this is September of 2007. That is retail sales that took place in August of 2007.
So January.
So it's the month that we collect it, or that it's reported to the Department of Revenue and that we collect it, is what it's showing here.
So it's appropriate to say that January reflects the holiday shopping?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that is very appropriate.
You're welcome.
It's for Joanne's
I
store.
have to say it.
Yes.
Go on, Larry.
The other part is the September data, that's the end of this chart, represents data that we received last week. So August sales, it takes until November for us to actually receive the data. That is because we are part of the state collection system, and the timing of it goes for Osborne Jewelers, not to mention any names, but for the sales that they report for the month that just ended in October, they are required to submit their report by November 25th to the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona turns the cash over fairly quickly to us that we would probably have that cash before the end of November. But we do not get a report outlining what that is until early January of 2008.
Well, shouldn't Osborne and Julius then pay us interest for that period, that lag time?
Yeah,
So there.
I think Target wants.
With that, we're going to move along real quickly to the next schedule before I get any deeper in trouble. But there is a timing difference that I think was important to understand as we go through this process. Next, I did a monthly analysis of what the sales tax collections accumulated were for the previous 12 months, and this goes back to June of 2006. This is a running 12-month total. In other words, it's 12. This is 12 months ending June 30th of 2006. This one is the 12 months ending July of 2006. So they have 11 months in common each step across the way. Do that so that if you notice the previous chart, we were very volatile. It was going up and down on trends. It's kind of hard to watch where it's trending. You'll notice that this trend peaked in about March of 2007, but maintained those steady levels up through June of 2007, and then has started to drop down in the last 3 months that we have.
Now, Larry,
Yes, sir.
some comments have been made that this basically, the impact on us losing sales tax is by the businesses in other communities that are coming online for them. How true is that?
We'll go through right now the retail, and let's just look at the retail data and see if we can answer that. I think there's a couple of answers as part of that, and I think that that is one part of the answer to that.
Thank you.
This is from the same data. This is retail only. Retail is just that, places where you buy merchandise. Jewelry stores, Target, Home Depot would be included in there. Does not include construction sales tax, does not include restaurants or hotels. Primarily, not in the retail category. Those are a different category. There are a number of different categories in there. The first trend that you see was that, similar to the overall sales tax, we were showing an increase from 2005 through 2007. That line started to increase at a more rapid rate. You'll notice that our projections for 2008 reflected a fairly significant increase. That is because there's a number of stores, as we did our budget, there's a number of stores expected to open this year, some of which already have. We have no data on the sales from those stores. It'll be 6 months from now before we really are going to start to measure the impact of them.
So these basically are projections on
In this case, this was the budget number that we projected in April as we were building the budget. It was before we had a lot of the data that we're showing you tonight. This is data that we had 6 months ago when we made those estimates. Here are the individual months through there. You'll notice really high in dated January 1 of 2006 and January 1 of 2007. Those are December sales. This particular month was an anomaly retail transaction that was a catch-up, as I understand, of one particular payer for several months. I'm not sure I know any more than that about it, but a very unusual one-time transaction that we would leave out for any analysis as we move forward. But if you look in the retail, we've got 6 of the last 8 months on this chart are reflecting a downward trend from the previous month. So how does that look when I do a 12-month cumulative average on that? You can see good growth rates back in 2006. Numbers increased from 8.7 million to over 10 million in that period of time of '07, and that's when then they started slowly declining, and then the last 3 months have declined a little more significantly. I think as we look back and do some of these comparisons, you look at some of the retail that has opened in Buckeye fairly recently, whereas many of those sales were moving into Goodyear because they didn't have it. As the residential has grown there, the demand for retail has grown there also, and so that would be a portion of the factor. Others within Avondale, similar, that might have been coming here. And as I indicated, this does not factor in the impacts of the new retail that we have opening as we speak. Wanted to talk a little bit about the construction sales tax, because for the year that we just completed, the construction sales tax represented about 50% of our total sales tax revenue. See, those trends really spiked up, again, in similar time frame. The tax rate increase was effective here, but took longer to take effect, came into effect more here because of the timing. It was building permits issued after the construction sales tax rate changed, and so any building permits issued before that, including residential, it took 9 months to 14 months to complete. That's when that sales tax started coming through. And here's the monthly construction sales tax chart. You can see again, we've got the same trend going up, and it's hard to read a trend when it's bouncing up and down as significantly as it is in this particular chart. But this one, as Councilman Sousa's question of a few minutes ago, this number in August of 2007 included that large transaction that really spiked that number up. It was about 2.2 million. Without that transaction, that number would have been less than 1.5 million. And so would have been somewhere here on this particular chart. And so,
Larry,
yes, sir.
Is your office able to break down the difference between residential and commercial and industrial
No, sir.
construction sales tax?
No, sir. No, that is a very good question. We can break down to a degree, but all we get is a payment journal that tells us who the taxpayer is, which would be the construction company, and what they're paying. If someone does construction for both residential and commercial, it could be infrastructure, for example, we would not be able to identify that separately. I don't think I answered your question, Vice Mayor.
Okay, so you're not able to differentiate. It makes sense. You're not able. I mean, somebody pays construction sales tax on water and wastewater infrastructure when they're putting it in the ground because it's construction related. You're not
That's
able
correct.
to discern whether that's residential or commercial.
That's correct.
Okay, and you're not able to discern.
We would be able to, for many of the home builders, we would probably be able to determine what they paid based on their closings, but the underlying infrastructure, we'll talk a little bit about some differences in a couple of slides from now, because they do report differently. So we've got some trends that we're watching because of that, because there are some differences.
Can you address that later in your
Yeah,
presentation?
in a couple of minutes, we'll address it, and let's see if that clears it or makes it muddier. Councilman, or,
That might be an answer to my question as well.
okay, we'll go through that. The construction sales tax, as you can see, these last few months has started to slow down, trending, following the same patterns that we're seeing on the total and that we're seeing on the retail. We borrowed some information from the Community Development Department, and that is single-family residential building permits. How are they trending? You can see they've kind of been over, and this is monthly data also dating back to 2005. You can see that they've been bouncing, but the trends were higher, and over the last few months, those numbers have slowed down. with that, and I think this kind of moves to some of the questions Vice Mayor was just asking a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the impact on those on those building permits and how that flows through to us in the sales tax dollars. I'm going to start with the residential sales tax. Residential sales tax construction is taxed at the time of closing to the end consumer. So when you buy a house, at the time you close to purchase that house, and I'm assuming you do it through a builder, this is not about the sales tax code, but assuming the traditional through the builder, the construction sales tax is paid at closing for residential, not when you sign the contract, nor during the period of time that the contractor is putting it together, paying the subs and so forth. On the other hand, non-residential construction sales tax is paid monthly as the contractor is paid. So today in Goodyear, we are in an environment where our single-family residential building permits are decreasing. At the same time, though, our building permit revenues are holding steady, and that is because of commercial building permits that are being issued and the valuation of them. The commercial turns to cash quicker than the residential because it's paid throughout the process. So what we can predict as we go forward is that at some point we know that the construction sales tax will drop kind of off the table, even if residential building permits have increased because of that time lag. That I would expect to happen as a lot of the activity that is going on right now starts to mature. I do not expect that to happen in the next 6 months. We have a number of major projects that are moving right now. The stadium is just getting kicked into high gear. The improvements around the mall, all of the buildings that are going to get started in the mall, that they will be starting construction and bringing in the construction sales tax revenues over that period of time. What we can't really measure accurately is when do we expect to see that construction sales tax slow down as we go forward. I put in as a bullet here the projected economic recovery as it relates to single-family housing. From everything that we've read, the earliest we've seen is the third calendar quarter of 2009. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago with a developer who reflected those same numbers, and normally they're on the optimistic side. But let's use that for point of discussion. If third quarter 2009 is when the single-family residential will pick up to previously expected levels, the impacts for the city in construction sales tax will be about July of 2010 because it lags that much further.
Wouldn't the amount of commercial development that we have going on, that certainly is going to be coming online between now and 2009, wouldn't that have a tendency to kind of cushion our total losses from sales tax, or from both retail
Yes.
and residential?
Yes, I think that is what's cushioning us today. And my real question is how long will it, at what level will it sustain? That's what we have to monitor. And we'll be watching that as closely as we can for that very data.
So we really can't expect any sales tax from Australia Falls probably until middle of 2010 then?
As far as the retail sales tax, The retail we'll get within a month after they open. It's the construction that I'm talking about that is that much of a lag. But the retail, as the store opens, will come in. Now, what we cannot measure in this, and all of these numbers that I've shown you tonight ignore, except for our budget calculations previously, is the impact for the retail that is opening today. We do not have that in this as we're going forward. Now, in effect, what that's doing is making an assumption that the impact of that retail will be zero. In other words, that it will take sales tax dollars from existing stores. We know that to be an extremely pessimistic and unlikely scenario. On the other hand, if we were to go in and simply estimate based on $300 per square foot sales estimates and use that, that would be at the high end, because there will be some factor where it'll impact existing businesses. It'll also draw in. And where do we measure, and what will that number be?
Yeah, because what's happening now by other businesses that are outside the community now, drawing on us, we will be drawing on them as our commercial properties come online.
Yes. And
Or is that overly optimistic?
I
You could use perhaps.
guess as we're looking at this, as we're looking in the future, all 7 of you could write down exactly what's going to happen in the retail. We'd have 7 different answers, and I wouldn't argue one of them to be wrong. Because that's the times that we're in. If you look at the retail, for example, right now, nationwide, October, same store retail for, I'm going to say Walmart. I think it was Walmart that was in the article. 0.4% was their growth for the month of October.
Well, it's up 8% today, according to the market.
The stock,
Stock, yeah.
yes, the stock,
Well,
but not the retail sales, not same store sales. For the month of October, it was only up 0.4. The ones that were up higher were the Costco's, Sam's Clubs, those types of stores were up higher. The highest one, I believe, was Costco, about 9.5%, but their sales data included retail, which was, gas, I'm sorry, which is a big spike and not nearly a profit spike. In the interest of some time, I'm going to move through a couple of charts and get down to the point of the story, if you will. We have revised the revenue forecasts from our budget. Right now, the existing budget shows approximately $89.5 million in total revenues. The numbers we've been talking about are up here, the $52 million in sales tax. You'll notice the rest of them we're leaving steady. Our building permit revenues are still holding strong with the commercial valuations. At this point, we have no evidence to adjust that, so we're leaving those the same. We're adjusting this down by $8 million based on the information that we're receiving right now. Quick chart that'll show you how that looks. The budget number is 2008, with the construction sales tax being the blue portion and the tan colored being the other sales tax. The combined total in the budget was about $52 million. Revised high estimate, as we as a budget staff have discussed it, high estimate about $50 million, with the construction holding on because of all the retail and, because of all the retail or commercial construction going on now, and then the retail coming lower in the other categories than what we originally projected. What we're projecting today is what's in the revised bar, which the components of that, we're saying we overestimated our other sales tax categories by about $7 million and our construction sales tax by about $1 million. The low-end scenario drops the construction even more significantly, as well as the other sales tax categories. So with that, the obvious question is, where do we go from here? The real point of this discussion was to give you a bit of an update on this, to get any input that you may have. But we are not proposing at this point in time any adjustments to the budget. We have a $20 million stabilization fund, and the whole point of that fund is so that we do not have to react quickly to changes that come suddenly in our revenue projections. And that's what we intend to do, is to monitor the situation closely and keep you informed as we go through. If the numbers look worse as we go forward, we would come back and discuss other options with you. Just today in the directors' meeting, we talked about each of the departments looking through internally in the mirror and see where they can save some money. And I think we'll go forward with that from an internal review to be prepared should anything need to be adjusted. But at this point, we're not recommending that. We are anticipating adjustments to the capital improvement plan. As you recall, our capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan, and it was based on estimates. Those estimates really assumed that the building permit growth would continue at past levels. So we need to revise that. That may result in the stretching out of projects that are currently on that plan. They may take a little longer before they're completed. We're working on the 5-year revised estimates, and over the next couple of weeks we'll have the revenue side of that, and then the CIP committee will be looking at those impacts at that point in time. And very quickly, in 30 seconds or less, what will next year's budget look like? Traditionally, as we've gone through the budget process, we've looked at taking a base budget and adding supplementals for operating, how many additional staff might be hired, and so forth. This year, the priorities, as we look in this budget process, if any revenues are available, the priorities will start with additional programs. An example of that is the stadium. We have $1 million in this year's budget, but the annual operating cost of that has been assumed to be $2 million all along in those discussions. Personnel costs. We have a comp class study that's been ongoing. How will that impact us in the budget? How about the various benefits, health insurance and retirement? Those costs have been increasing over the past couple of years. How will they play in? And finally, the implementation of the matrix assessment. If we're through all of those and have money left over for other projects, it would be a major surprise, because that's really drilling pretty deep into a fairly tight revenue supply. So with 4 minutes before the council meeting, I ask if you have any further questions, or obviously I'm available for questions at another time.
Let me ask if anyone does. Comments or questions over here? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just one very quick question. The construction sales tax, we're still using that for one-time expenditures?
Yes, sir. We have, as part of the budget process, set that aside for one-time or capital projects. We intend to continue that in the long term.
Member Cavalier?
Just one question. I read in the paper that there's a possibility of another baseball team looking for a home that Goodyear might be a place for that. How will that impact our budget? Or will that impact our budget? Is this something we can even look at?
This is something that was contemplated. If the council will remember several years ago when we discussed the revolving fund, the concept of how are we going to pay for the stadium, how are we going to pay for the I-10 widening before some of that funding came together, this actually in that model was contemplated at that point in time. So there still are options to be able, for this group, to be able to consider that should you elect to consider it.
Thank you.
Question, Larry, and I asked this a year ago, I think. Can we determine what our buildup of unsold new housing is in Goodyear? Because that's going to affect our economic prosperity over the next couple of years. If these fellows have a lot of houses to sell,
You
then
mean built inventory, or you're saying home
unsold
sites?
new houses.
Sold new, so,
Yeah.
okay.
In essence, ones that we've issued construction permits for but haven't collected sales tax.
So that's their inventory, essentially.
Is there an inventory of unsold out there? Like, I assume there is in Goodyear, but I don't know that for sure. And if it's significant, then that will, in my opinion, lengthen the time for us to recover.
Okay. That's something we'd have to research. That's a good question.
I mean, if the
I'll
builders
work
would
with
give the information.
community development on that and see if we can get you an answer. It's a good question.
Okay. How about, what is that, 559?
Yeah.
How about 605? Is that good? Okay, 605. Larry, for the report.
Thank you, Larry.